Saul Goodman is a fictional character in the American television drama series Breaking Bad and the spin-off series Better Call Saul on AMC. He is portrayed by Bob Odenkirk and was created by series creator Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould, a writer of the series. Saul is a criminal lawyer and can be easily found in the Yellow Pages of Albuquerque. His made-up surname Goodman is a play on words to better attract clients. Saul Goodman becomes Saul Goodman. He is also known for his low-budget television commercials and print advertisements in Albuquerque, wherein he advertises mainly under the tagline, "OE Better Call Saul." Character biography, background. Upon first meeting Walt, Saul explains his real name is not Goodman, and he is actually Irish. He says he chose the name because it sounded Jewish, faith and begorrah. A fellow potato eater. My real name's McGill. The Jew thing I just do for the homeboys. They all want a pipe-hitting member of the tribe, so to speak. Saul has had multiple wives in the past, one of whom he caught having sex with his stepfather. At a certain point, he developed a romantic relationship with his secretary, albeit short-lived. He has a highly stylized office in a cheap strip mall. With a repertoire that includes small-time drug busts, fraudulent insurance claims, class actions, and his overbearing manner, he might seem disreputable to police and certain other lawyers. However, despite his shady appearance, Saul is a highly competent extra-legal operator, adept at sniffing out legal loopholes and able to negotiate good deals on the behalf of his clients. He has a strong familiarity with the criminal trade and has connections to some of its most influential distributors, like Gus Fring. He also employs the services of a veteran private investigator named Mike, who executes often illegal commands from Saul and Gus, such as cleaning up crime scenes and bugging homes. Saul is also not without integrity, as he is shown to honor the ethics of his profession, particularly the attorney-client privilege, and is reluctant to involve himself with violence or murder. Little is known of Saul's legal education. In one episode, a diploma is shown in Saul's office, indicating that Saul Goodman holds a Master of Arts degree in political science from the University of American Samoa. However, this is a fake credential, as there is no such educational institution, and Saul's last name is actually McGill. Saul is introduced in the Season 2 episode Better Call Saul, following Badger's arrest for selling meth. After the arrest, Walt and Jesse contact Saul, after Jesse points out to Walt that they don't need a criminal lawyer, but a criminal lawyer. Walter hires Saul to keep Badger out of prison and goes to extreme lengths to ensure Saul prevents Badger from incriminating Walt. Saul soon becomes a regular character on Breaking Bad. Season 2, following Badger's arrest for selling meth, Walt and Jesse contact Saul for legal representation, as Jesse knew him from successfully defending Emilio twice, and getting him released almost immediately from jail. Walt, posing as Badger a unregistered trademark's uncle Mr. Mayhew, hires him to keep Badger out of prison. Unfortunately, while meeting Badger at the police station, he catches a glimpse of Hank Schrader and Stephen Gomez, and deduces that they are interested in his client and plans to make a deal with the DEA for Badger to testify against his dealer OE Heisenberg Walt, recognizing the danger, offers Saul $10,000 to keep Badger from talking to the DEA, but Saul refuses, claiming to be emerely outraged. Walt and Jesse then take more desperate measures, kidnapping Saul and taking him to the desert to threaten him into keeping Badger from testifying. However, Saul quickly points out it would make more sense to kill Badger in prison, but Walt and Jesse reject this solution. Recognizing OE Mr. Mayhew from Walt unregistered trademark's hacking cough, he quickly offers to be their lawyer, accepting payment of $6 on the spot to establish a confidential attorney-client relationship. To throw the DEA off Walt and Jesse unregistered trademark's trail, Saul proposes the use of James Edward Kilkley, who fits Heisenberg unregistered trademark's description and is a professional fall guy who takes the rap for other people for a fee. In exchange for $80,000 and a decoy pound of meth, Saul has Badger cooperate with the authorities and a sting operation leads to Jimmy unregistered trademark S arrest. With his private investigator Mike figuring out who Walt is within an hour, Saul intrigued by the unregistered trademark S interest in Walt unregistered trademark S producer proposes that Walt hire him as his consigliere, in the same vein as Tom Hagen from The Godfather. Walt ultimately accepts the offer, gaining Saul unregistered trademark S expertise. In an effort to help pay for Walt's cancer treatment, Walter Jr. sets up the website, www.savewalterwhite.com, which requests and collects donations. When Walt tells Saul about not wanting to accept donations, Saul tells Walt that it is a perfect opportunity to launder money. Saul arranges for a wave of fake donations drawn from Walt's drug money. When Jesse discovers that Jane has died in his bed from choking, during a drug-induced sleep, he contacts Walt, who contacts Saul. Saul sends Mike to clean up the crime scene and mitigate Jesse's involvement with Jane's death. Season 3, following the success of a $1.2 million sale of 38 pounds of meth, to Gus Fring, Saul pushes Walt to take Pugh's unregistered trademark S lucrative offer to continue cooking. Saul also accepts a job from Jesse, using Jesse unregistered trademark S half of the earnings to purchase Jesse's late aunt unregistered trademark S house at a dramatically lowered price, by strong-arming Jesse unregistered trademark S parents and attorney with a potential lawsuit concerning the undisclosed meth lab Jesse was running out of the basement. After Walt reveals Skyler has threatened to expose him, Saul assures Walt that she wouldn't talk due to blowback on the family, but Saul secretly hires Mike to bug the White's house as insurance. Forced to leave early when Walt comes home, Mike witnesses the cousins entering with an axe and quickly places a call to Gus to call them off. Per Pugh's unregistered trademark S direction, Saul has not been informed of this threat to Walt. Mike later brings Walt to Saul after Walt creates a disturbance at Skyler unregistered trademark S office, and attempts to talk Walt into cooking meth again. After Saul admits that he bugged Walter unregistered trademark S house, Walt attacks and subsequently fires him. Furious, Saul stops laundering Walter unregistered trademark S drug money. Jesse then approaches Saul with 2 bags of meth he has cooked himself using Walter unregistered trademark S procedure, and asks to set up a deal. He meets with Victor to make the exchange, only to see he has been given half of the money the other half goes to Walt. Saul sets up an intervention between Walt and Jesse, offering to give Walt a percentage of Jesse unregistered trademark S future deals. Walt returns Jesse unregistered trademark S half, coldly informing both of them that he has now accepted Pugh's unregistered trademark S offer and will be cutting Jesse out of the business. Quickly dumping Jesse in favor of the much higher profits Walt can produce, Saul is once again hired to launder money for Walt this time for a dramatically reduced percentage. When Hank successfully deduces the existence of the RV, Walt calls Saul in a panic. Saul scolds him for not having a contingency plan. After Hank locates the RV with Walt and Jesse trapped inside, Walt calls Saul for assistance. Saul has his secretary Francesca masquerade as a law enforcement official to make Hank believe his wife has been severely injured in a car accident. Saul regrets being a part of the cruel ruse, while Francesca tells him she should be paid more for this sort of work. After Walt murders 2 drug dealers and Jesse goes on the run, Mike storms into Saul's office and seemingly intimidates him into revealing Jesse's whereabouts. Having given Mike a fake address, when Saul secretly meets with Walt and Jesse, he expresses dismay at having been put in a difficult position. Season 4, after Jesse murders Gale at the end of Season 3, it is shown that Saul has locked up his offices and is a security guard at the door. Saul starts scanning his offices for bugs and becomes increasingly paranoid due to Walt's falling out with Gus. Saul suggests to Skyler she should buy a laser tag business to launder Walter unregistered trademark S drug money. Skyler objects because it does not fit their story and instead sets her sight on purchasing the car wash Walt has previously worked for. When the owner Bogdan, who still harbors ill feeling toward Walt, refuses to sell. Skyler and Walt ask Saul for help. Saul suggests they could accuse Bogdan of harboring al-Qaeda terrorists, but Walt rejects because Bogdan is not Arabic. Eventually, they concoct a plan to force Bogdan to sell. Skyler hires Saul, a unregistered trademark henchman Cubai, to perform a fake environmental audit on the car wash and threaten to shut down the business due to contaminants. Bogdan is forced to sell at an even lower offer. When Walt laments to Saul about how the meth business is falling apart because no one is acting professionally, he proposes that Walt to go into hiding, which suggestion Walt soundly rejects. When Walt angrily blows up the Dodge Challenger he'd bought for Walt Jr. but which Skyler insisted Walt return, Saul helps deal with the legal consequence and cover up the incident. After paying Saul for his services, Walt asks for a list of hitmen he could hire to kill Gus. Saul advises against it since Mike knows all of the contacts, and hiring outside of his network carries the risk of encountering undercover cops. Ted tells Skyler that his business is being audited for tax fraud. Since Skyler was his bookkeeper, she could also be implicated. At the audit, Skyler acts completely ignorant of accounting practices. The IRS agent, believing the fraud was simply a mistake, orders Ted to pay back taxes and fines. Ted, however, refuses to comply. Then Skyler, against Saul, a unregistered trademark's advice, arranges for Ted to receive enough money to pay his IRS debt by having Saul manufacture a fake relative who leaves Ted a sizable inheritance. However, a follow-up by Saul reveals that Ted is not using the money to pay the IRS. With no other options, Skyler has Saul, a unregistered trademark's men, Helen Cubai, to force Ted to write the check. They succeed, but in Ted, unregistered trademark's attempt to flee, he trips and seriously injures himself. Gus coerces Walt into a meeting, where he informs him that he is going to kill Hank to cover their tracks, and threatens to kill Walt and his family if he tries to intervene. Walt barges into Saul's office and takes up on an earlier offer to go into hiding. Walt also asks Saul to anonymously tip the DEA that Hank is being targeted. Saul initially refuses but ultimately agrees, provided Gus's name isn't mentioned. Afterward, Saul gives Jesse back his money and prepares to flee Albuquerque temporarily until the fallout between Walt and Gus is over. Season 5. In the 5th season it is revealed that Saul tasked Hal to pickpocket the Reese's cigarette from Jesse, but didn't know it would result in Brock's poisoning. Saul attempts to end his partnership with Walt, but Walt backs him to a corner and intimidates him back into compliance. As Walt, Jesse, and Mike set up their own meth operation in the vacuum left by Gus's demise, Saul helps them find a meth lab and equips them with a team consisting of Ira, Todd, and others. Saul helps Mike when the DEA comes close to catching him. Jesse asks Saul to deliver his share of the drug money to Mike's granddaughter and the family of Drew Sharp, a child Todd murdered for witnessing a train heist, but Saul refuses. After Hank discovers that Walt is Heisenberg, Saul advises Walt that Hank should be killed, which suggestion Walt angrily rejects. Later, when Jesse gets picked up by the police and interrogated by Hank after trying to throw away his money, Saul bails him out of custody. Later, after arranging a meeting between Walt and Jesse to discuss how to handle Hank's investigation, Saul arranges with his contact to set Jesse up with a new identity far away from Albuquerque. However, Jesse realizes Saul's complicity in Brock's poisoning and beats a confession out of him. Saul subsequently advises Walt to call in a hit on Jesse. After Hank and Gomez are killed and Walt's criminality is publicly exposed, Saul decides to set himself up with a new identity. He and Walt spend several days in a basement together while Saul's extractor, Ed, makes the necessary arrangements. Walt asks Saul to help him find hitmen to kill Hank's murderers, but Saul instead advises Walt to turn himself in to avoid a lengthy and humiliating federal investigation against Skyler. Walt again attempts to threaten Saul into complying, but breaks down in a coughing fit. With his transportation ready, Saul leaves Walt and heads for a new life in Nebraska. Better Call Saul spin-off. In April 2013, it was announced that a spin-off series focusing on Saul is being developed by Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan and writer Peter Gould. The latter wrote the episode that introduced the character. Gilligan had considered it in a July 2012 interview. "I like the idea of a lawyer show in which the main lawyer will do anything it takes to stay out of a court of law. He'll settle on the courthouse steps, whatever it takes to stay out of the courtroom. That would be fun. I would like that." In July 2013, Vince Gilligan commented that the series had yet to be greenlit, but he and Gould are full speed ahead on trying to get going. In developing the series, they are considering making it a half-hour show with a comedic tone but might still choose to go with a one-hour drama like Breaking Bad and will not reveal whether it would be a prequel or sequel series until Breaking Bad finishes its run. During his appearance on Talking Bad, Odenkirk noted that Saul was one of the more popular characters on the show, speculating that the audience likes the character because he is the program's least hypocritical and is good at his job. On September 11, 2013, it was announced that the series had been greenlit by AMC, given the tentative title Better Call Saul, and will be a prequel in a one-hour format. On December 16, 2013, it was announced that the series would be exclusively shown on Netflix in the UK after US airing. References. External links. Official website, Saul Goodman at AMC, Saul Goodman at the Internet Movie Database. Further reading, Josh Ralske. Better Call Saul. The Best of Saul Goodman on Breaking Bad. TWC Central A.